Hey everybody. Might be wondering why you're watching videos about John Green, who probably has taught you more about social studies than the books you've read of his. But the idea is just that, authors are people too. People with experiences write things. John Green's newest book, Turtles All the Way Down, is based on his own experiences with anxiety and OCD. And the task you're about to embark on is, it's from the Regents exam, which you take in 11th grade, either January or June of your junior year. And this is the part 3. There are 3 parts. Part 1 is multiple choice. Part 2 is something like a research paper. And part 3 is what's known as literary analysis, meaning that you have to analyze a piece of text in writing. And essentially what it's going to ask you to do is to figure out what the central idea is of that passage. Like, what's the main idea? What is the theme? Or what is the message you walk away with that the author has given you? And the other part of it, which is the analysis part, it's asking you to analyze one of the writer's use of a writing strategy. And it's essentially their tools of the trade. A plumber uses wrenches. A carpenter uses a hammer. Authors use writing strategies in order to help get their message across or to tell a story. So what I'm asking you to do right now, before we get too far into the writing part of it, it's the reading part of it that we also need to take care of here. And this, as you can see, once you flip the page, is a passage written by, it's part of a letter written by Martin Luther King Jr., and he wrote it while he was being held in a Birmingham, Alabama jail during an important time during the Civil Rights Movement. And this passage in particular, it really does a nice job of kind of tying thematically the Pearl and To Kill a Mockingbird together. So it's part of the reason why we're reading it as well. It kind of fits into the curriculum that we've been tackling this year. One thing that you need to know is that this writing task, ultimately is about the words and the phrases that writers use. So be paying attention to maybe some of the more vivid pieces. You could make marks here in the margin, but that's your goal. The first time through reading it, we're looking for things that are colorful or vivid or memorable in the margin. So do yourself a favor, read it through one time, make marks as you see fit in terms of the vividness of some of Martin Luther King Jr.'s language in this passage. And if Mrs. Chibiniak could sub the video right now until everybody's had a chance to read it through, we'll come back together in, I don't know, it might take you 7, 8, 9 minutes. Okay, the next section here is going to ask you to answer some questions based on the reading. The first batch of reading questions here focuses mostly on comprehension of the passage that you read. You're being asked to answer these in your notebook. I know that it looks like there might be some room here and in these little white spaces, but your answers are going to go in your notebook for these answers. The first section, as I said, deals with like an understanding and maybe putting it in a historical sort of picture or just understanding the excerpt in general. You can see this second section is already focusing on one of the writer's writing strategies. Contrast is a writing strategy that writers use maybe to get a point across. In this one, I think you'll notice there's things like jet-like speed is part of the contrast versus a horse and buggy, not to give anything away. But you're also in charge of 7, 8, 9, and 10. And if you can't finish those by the time class is over, they become homework. Anyway, here's the passage again. We know through painful experience that freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. Frankly, I've yet to engage in a direct action campaign that was, quote, well-timed in the view of those who have not suffered unduly from the disease of segregation. For years now, I've heard the word wait. It rings in the ear of every Negro with piercing familiarity. This, quote, wait has almost always meant never. We must come to see with one of our distinguished jurists that, quote, justice too long delayed is justice denied. We've waited for more than 340 years for our constitutional and God-given rights. The nations of Asia and Africa are moving with jet-like speed toward gaining political independence, but we still creep at horse and buggy pace toward gaining a cup of coffee at a lunch counter. Perhaps it is easy for those who have never felt the stinging darts of segregation to say, wait. But when you have seen vicious mobs lynch your mothers and fathers at will and drown your sisters and brothers at whim, when you've seen hate-filled policemen curse, kick, and even kill your black brothers and sisters, when you see the vast majority of your 20 million Negro brothers smothering in an airtight cage of poverty in the midst of an affluent society, when you suddenly find your tongue twisted and your speech stammering as you seek to explain to your 6-year-old daughter why she can't go to the public amusement park that has just been advertised on television, and see tears welling up in her eyes when she's told that Funtown is closed to colored children, and see ominous clouds of inferiority beginning to form in her little mental sky, and see her beginning to distort her personality by developing an unconscious bitterness toward white people, when you have to concoct an answer for a 5-year-old son who is asking, Daddy, why do white people treat colored people so mean? When you take a cross-country drive and find it necessary to sleep night after night in the uncomfortable corners of your automobile because no motel will accept you, when you are humiliated day in and day out by nagging signs reading white and colored, when your first name becomes the N-word, your middle name becomes your middle name becomes Boy, however old you are, and your last name becomes John, and your wife and mother are never given the respected title Mrs., when you are harried by day and haunted by night by the fact that you are a Negro living constantly at tiptoe stance, never quite knowing what to expect next, and are plagued with inner fears and outer resentments, when you are forever fighting a degenerating sense of nobodiness, then you will understand why we find it difficult to wait. There comes a time when the cup of endurance runs over, and men are no longer willing to be plunged into the abyss of despair. I hope, sirs, you can understand our legitimate and unavoidable impatience. It's a powerful piece. You and a partner or a small, hard-working group of 3 should get together and see if you can answer questions 1 through 10 in your notebook. 1 through 10. Invite somebody into your group. You see them kind of working by themselves. Invite them into your group. Work hard. The more you get done today in class, the less you have for homework. I'm sure Mrs. Jabiniak can answer any of the questions you have.